I'm Gary Bagley, and I'm in the rear of this canoe.
I'm Mike Morris, and I'm in the bow, and that's Five Finger Rapids.
Okay, this video is about our many trips on the Yukon Teslin River over 40 years.
We did this because it was fun. And we enjoyed what we did, the company we had, and because we got, in a moment you'll see another reason, kind of badgered into it to take this trip, because it was just, well, it could be a life-changing thing, and it was just, it was a great trip. There was a lot of things that happened on it, so.
The trip went basically from the Teslin River to the start of the Teslin River at the bottom to Dawson, which is the northern point of this red line. Frank Thrasher was the one that initially got us interested in it.
Yeah, Frank was grandparents to all of our kids, Gary's and mine, and he worked at Mount Edgecombe in the shop over there, and he was the scoutmaster of a scout troop, and then became a commissioner. And he had taken the trip between Johnson's Crossing and Carmack's, and he said, "You guys have got to take this trip." And he continued to push and push, and that was when I first got here in '71. So finally, by '78, we finally had everything organized, and we took the half trip, the 250 miles from Johnson's Crossing to Carmack's.
And we liked it so well that from 1978 through 2015, we took 15 different trips. Some of them the whole length, which was 550 miles, some of them 300, and some of them 250, depending which section of the trip we did. Most of them were with the Boy Scouts, however, some were with adults, especially in the later years.
Into the Klondike. We left Sitka on the blue canoes, the ferries, when it was still running, and got off on the first trip, dropped Gary and Frank off in Haines, and they drove up to Whitehorse and on to Johnson's Crossing. We took the train out of Skagway up to Whitehorse, and they backtracked and picked us up and took us up to Johnson's Crossing.
One reason we did this trip is both Mike and I taught history and were keenly interested in history, and the Klondike Gold Rush was a specific interest we both had.
Yeah, we did a a simulation game on the Klondike Gold Rush, and a lot of history with the kids and with the scouts before we went. You're looking at that left slide is the way that a lot of the people went up into the Yukon. We did take the Chilkoot Trail with the scouts once. We hiked it, and the scouts did well. The miners, guys, a lot of them got up to Bennett and turned around, and if they didn't, they built boats there and paddled on through down to across Lake Bennett and into the Yukon. And then the river boats, the sternwheelers, were coming eventually up there, but we never saw.
And once they got to the Klondike, the early mining in particular was done in streams and shallow ground. But later on, very rich strikes were well underground, because in ancient times the stream had shifted. So with that in mind, we retraced the steps of the Stampeders. We also did it just because we plain like the area. In the summer it's nice, it is not as buggy as people think, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's an amazing place. Driving on the river, on the river, so we could drive from Skagway up to eventually Dawson, and over to Johnson Crossing to drop us off. And then on the river, it was Johnson's Crossing down to Hoodlink, where the Teslin joined the 30 mile, and then it became the Yukon and on up to Carmax, and eventually to Dawson.
Before we ever went, there was all kinds of preparation. It took months for us to get ready because we had as many as, 14, 16 people at different times?
Yeah.
Other groups might have been small. But it always started out with a bunch of lists.
Yeah, we finally, after our first trip, put our heads together and said, well, made a couple of decisions. One was we wanted to take the rest of the trip, the second half. And we changed up some stuff, made a list, and we put it on to this canoe trip thing. Some items stayed the same, but they differed. Otherwise, gear changed in that some of it got better, smaller, more efficient. We gave up fires and took
cooking fires.
Cooking fires, yeah. Yeah, we had to have warming and drying fires at times. But this list is pretty solid. And then the menus and the food and everything we worked out. We changed too.
Before we even left, we had to buy supplies, and it involved grocery stores and sometimes gear for the canoes, and then load up. And we had gear checks for the boys. They were to bring in all their things they were bringing, and we'd call out boots, and they'd need to hold up their boots, and we didn't want them to go without the gear they needed. But for some reason, rain gear was the most commonly left item, which was a big mistake. And then we put it all together in somebody's garage.
And to make sure that it all got there, after the second inspection, we took it away from them and locked it up.
We had a lot of different kinds of canoes, good and bad, and most of them were fiberglass, like the green and the buff-colored one on the rack there. Some were laminates, like the red one. Some were kind of high-end plastic. Unfortunately, we had some low-end plastic and aluminum, but they did all right. Some of the better canoes were wood strip canoes. Mike and I both made one. Mine was 16. It's in this picture. Mike's was 17. The one in the middle with me paddling is from LL Bean, and that's a laminate that has flotation between the two layers. And the bottom one is fiberglass. The fiberglass one is probably the best, although it was a little heavy. It was large and configured in such a way that it was good for river travel as well as flat water.
The bad. Oil canning. It's those ripples in the bottom of the boat. It will slow you down. It is not good, and it makes turning difficult. The blunt bow just pushes the water, so you have a fairly slow entry, bad entry into it. It's just slow. You need added flotation in the boat, and the flat bottom it has initial stability, is pretty good, but the secondary stability, if you're leaning into an eddy turn, it gets a little wobbly in there.
Every canoe had to take group gear, and ideally it was action packers or fiberglass boxes that we made, which was indicated by the green area here, and personal gear would be under the seats and stuffed around here and there as indicated by the blue. This was the ideal, and here was the real. Things were stuffed here and there, but we always stress that no matter how you load it, your gear needs to be tied in some way or other. So we would use tie downs that would run from a thwart, as you can see on the right hand side, and weave it through gear to the forward thwart. And we had several turnovers, and surprisingly we lost little gear. The gear we had, it changed over time. We made do with this for a while, then we would change it out with something better.
We had grills, grates that we would put over the fire because we had to have a lot of water for spaghetti, water for doing dishes, and just to purify it sometimes. But each time the grates melted, they just sagged due to the weight and the heat of the fire. So we eventually got some fire irons. Well, they were just angle iron from Sitka, and put them across the fire. And they were stout and cheap, and they worked great.
Cutting tools, we needed to have several of them, different kinds. The saw was expensive but good. It was I couldn't think of a better crosscut saw. It folded up into just basically like a big stick. We encouraged kids to have their Leatherman type knife, mainly because of the pliers. The pliers are really useful in taking hot things off the fire. During the winter, the ice pushes campsites, grinds places up, and roses grow. And that instrument, Woodsman's Pal in the lower right, was really handy in clearing those areas. And of course, we had axes. We needed to split wood for fires. Every morning, every night, we had a fire and sometime at lunch. Camera gear. I do a lot of photography, and I love GoPros, but in my opinion, they're not good for canoeing. They're action cameras, and hopefully in canoeing you don't have a lot of quick action. The lower left camera, take a good camera. I mean, there's plenty of photography opportunities, and if you want something that's waterproof and you can use in bad weather, take a camera similar to the lower right. It's much more versatile. You're not locked into wide angle, and it's just a better choice.
Oh yeah, I brought a twin lens Rolleiflex, which was my father's camera. It has a 2¼ inch negative in it, and I just like to shoot it. It was a challenge, and it's slow and it's film, but I got some pretty good shots out of it.
And I found out that sitting on your gear doesn't give good pictures.
Utensils, boy, you hang on to that cup and those knife, fork, and spoon. Just strap them to you, put them somewhere where you can constantly have them, and such, because we don't take a lot of extras. As a matter of fact, I don't think we have much in the way of extras as far as utensils went. They were cooking utensils.
The repair kits, repair for canoe and gear, repair for cuts and scrapes. Repair for gear we didn't have a lot of. Air mattresses held up well. We generally had little odds and ends with the stove maybe. First aid kits, we often had to use first aid kits and cuts and bruises, but nothing serious. We had a couple kids get sick. We had a suture kit that we always threatened to use if we had to. Neither of us knew how to use it, so it was more to keep cuts down than to actually use.
Sleeping well. Yeah, we would first of all put a ground cloth down, put the tent over that, and then put a ground cloth inside of the tent. The ground cloth outside was smaller than the footprint of the tent, and the ground cloth inside the tent was a bit larger so it would come up. It kept the water out. We never got wet inside of it. So that's the first step in sleeping well. And then what we would do is you put a couple of pads down. You have a thermarest down there, and then put a foam pad, and then your sleeping bag. And like Gary, I do not like mummy bags. I can't stand those things. So we had triangular bags and such. Pillows, you could bring one, fold it up, or stuff it in a little stuff sack, or you could just have an empty pillow stuffer or something and make your own. Life jackets were great for a base layer for your pillow and such.
Some useful items that, well, a lot of things were useful, but these we wanted to put our personal take on some of them. Fire starters we always made before a trip, and they were just rolled up newspaper, very tightly rolled up, and then taped, and then put in hot paraffin. And after they sunk, meaning they were they absorbed as much paraffin as they could, we took them out and dried them. And we put those, everybody he needed to carry them along with a Bic lighter, and also with a little piece of mosquito coil, which we'll talk about the use of that later. Below that, even on the trip, stayed organized, kept our menu, kept our calendar, and also kept river guides to help tell us where we were. We didn't always know where we were, but we were close. DEET things, spray DEET is just a recipe for destroying everything plastic you own, including sleeping bags, sunglasses. DEET to me is the only thing that works, so I like the stick that's shown here so you can place it judiciously without spraying the countryside.
Oh yeah, we have had to filter our water, especially below the white. And one of the easiest ways of doing it on shore would be to take these bags that we got out of the Boundary Waters, I think, catalog, and they have filter in it, and you just pour the water in, and then it just drips down through a hose and into your water jug, which is up at the top of the screen. We used the 2.5 gallons. 5 was too heavy. Sometimes kids would drop it, and there was always a stop stick, and we had a lot of holes punched in them so they could handle the 2.5. Below the white, we had to probably change that thing every time we used it. There was so much silt in the river. I'll explain that a little bit later. Difficult decision. We brought a shotgun. Canadians allow you to do it. You have to have a permit and such, and it was, but it was a little nervous sometimes. Saying you're going to carry firearms on the trip. Well, yeah, we didn't have to use it very often, but every once in a while we needed to, just to discourage the bears. So.
And when we say use it, it was firing a warning shot.
Yeah, we never killed anything with it. And the boys all had instructions and learned how to shoot and use the shotgun.
Also, as we got older, we found the chairs were more important. On the first trips, we relied on the ground or upended rounds of wood, but later on, we did carry chairs. Camping. Most days we spent more time camping than canoeing, but not always. There were those rare days where we couldn't find a campsite, and we just kept going and going, and maybe to midnight.
Tents. You have to have a tent that's got a great umbrella over the top of it. If you don't have a good tarp over that tent that comes with it, then it's not going to work. It's, some of the other adults on the other trips found that out a little bit. So.
Also, we found that there's no reason to take a two-man tent for 2 people. On a canoe, you can have the luxury of a little more room. So, especially adults, we encourage 4-man tents for 2 people. We got very good at setting up our tent. As you'll see in this video in a second, we'd lay out the ground cloth, which, as Mike mentioned, was smaller than the floor, so it wouldn't catch rain coming off the top of the canoe. Then pegged out the floor of the tent and ran the support poles through the sleeves, erected the tent, hooked the sides, and then put the rain fly over the top. The rain fly has Velcro loops inside, so you'll see us attaching that Velcro loops to the frame, which strengthens the whole tent tremendously, and then finally throw the gear in. Yeah, those nice, had vestibules on both ends, which is really nice.
Yeah. One other thing about the tents is we told the boys that when they got up in the morning and they got out of the tent, that meant they had their sleeping bag and all their gear packed and ready to roll. And we would have to be out of camp by 9 in the morning because that's when the mosquitoes arrived. And believe me, they were very punctual.
You go ahead, Mike. You like cooking better than me.
Yeah, I enjoy eating too. But anyway, yeah, we had the first trip, the half trip, as we say. We had to have a fire going for cooking, and that just turned out to be not pleasant. I mean, we did it, but it was just kind of a struggle all the time. So we just decided to go to a Coleman fire, and we had 2-burner stove, and that worked out really well. The first trip we used, the first actual couple of 3 trips, we used a lot of freeze-dried food. But it got more and more spendy, and before we got into the Christmas tree sales, it was a burden to come up with how we're going to get enough money to pay for the trip. So we took turns cooking, one adult at breakfast and dinner, one boy breakfast, dinner, and the scouts could handle the lunch. Menus changed a little bit as we moved away from the freeze-dried, and we found out that eggs you could handle really well. We found bacon that was already pre-cooked. Spam was good. Ham that didn't need to be refrigerated. Eggs. We had breakfast burritos. And
yeah, I was surprised. Eggs lasted the whole trip.
They did, yeah.
We only had a couple rotten ones total over the years.
I know. And we found out, or I read somewhere, that where we could take the eggs and you just put them in boiling water for I forgot how many seconds, and that little membrane that's between the egg and the shell will seal it and take care of all of that bacteria that's in there, so they last a little bit better. And if we had an aluminum canoe, boy, we used that.
Yeah,
too.
because it was cooler on the bottom.
Yeah.
So the actual setup changed depending on the size of the group. As you can see here, later trips we used liquid propane. We carried Coleman fuel stoves early, but we really didn't gain anything by them. The Coleman fuel, though, always leaked a little bit. It was stinky. It smelled like gas in one of the canoes. So the propane was much better. And different places, like this one's ingenious. Somebody used an old wheelbarrow, looks like from the actual gold rush, to make a table. And you can see pudding, cup, and just the setup. The boys are figuring out how to cook a whole box of cream of wheat.
Not a little wet, is it?
I'd love to have breakfast.
So how you doing, Saxon?
Good. It's nice and rainy.
Menus, duties, and calendar. We did never ever put 2 scouts or 2 adults on the duty at the same time and that were in the same canoe, because that just created issues when we got into camp, setting up, and when we left. So we rotated it all, and we had not too many problems with it. We had breakfast, lunches, and dinners. Lunches sometimes were in the canoe tied together. When we just drifted down, it was a cold lunch. We had PB&J, or we would have tuna or chicken salad and such, and cheese, salami and such. Dinners were cooked. We always had veggie and other things. Jello on occasion when it worked.
The Jello had to be made in the morning, so
Yeah.
it might set up by dinner time.
Yeah, might. Yeah.
Also, on this one, on day it says the campsite. Some of these campsites, when we got there, weren't there anymore. The ice over the winter destroyed them, or they just weren't that good a campsite, like Eddy Turn and Park campsite. After a while, we never used. The kaibo. Kaibo is the Boy Scout term for the outhouse. There's a variety of them, and a pre-made one is always better than one that you have to dig. As my wife is, the low end is the one my wife's doing, and the high end one here is probably where the boys are over there. Looks like a throne. Now, the piece of the mosquito coil there, I said earlier, that needed to be with your lighter. When you go into an outhouse, almost always the place is crawling with critters, and it's not a place you want to hang out. But if you take a short piece of mosquito coil, light it, set it down, and walk it, shut the door if it has one, walk away, come back 5 minutes later, and the place is, well, I wouldn't say pristine, but it's a whole lot better than what it was. Why anybody would want to camouflage a toilet paper holder as the one with the X is just cruel. We had a Goosey Lucy, the one that's you see with the stripes here, which was plastic, it was watertight, and it glowed in the dark. It was perfect. A substitute can be a coffee can, but make sure that toilet paper will fit in it.
Justin, what are you doing?
Digging the hole for the latrine.
Why are you putting it over there?
Because the other side has roots.
Makes sense. Is it easier digging on that side?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Staying clean. Showers, pocket showers. We started out with the big shower thing that you pour water
Sun
into,
showers.
or the sun showers, and leave it up in the sun and whatever. But it was a lot easier to take the smaller pocket showers, just heat some water and then dilute it and pour it in there. It just was much more efficient and such.
Sometimes we wash clothes. Here he's washing it in hot water. Sometimes we just would pour water in the canoe, put our clothes down there, squirt some soap on it, and stomp on it for a couple miles. Both work pretty well. I made that thwart toilet kit because generally we didn't get cleaned up in the morning. We got going, as Mike said, we're trying to be out by 9. And so we'd clean up in the canoe, and that folded over the thwart in front of me, and I kept track of everything, and it was just real handy. We made sure we had emergency supplies, and for me, it's an emergency if I don't have coffee.
Why, you know that, because Frank and I hid the coffee.
I know,
with
the
you
first
guys.
trip, yeah.
Panicked, he had half a jar of instant. Dangers. Well, bears. We saw bears along the shore. We saw them swimming. We saw moose if we were quiet and catch up to them. The other wildlife was, we tried to find lynx. I think we saw maybe 1 or 2 lynx.
What? Oh yeah, I saw a couple of them.
Yeah, they're just have to be really whatever. The rabbits, the lynx and the rabbit population kind of went together. There are a lot of bunnies. There could be some lynx and otherwise not. Birds of all kinds and such.
Yeah, some of the most things you don't think about. You can look ahead and try to head off problems, but like the scout that's stuck in the mud. Yeah, it was all fun and games. They thought it was great. This was at the mouth of the 60 mile, and this kid got seriously stuck, and it took 2 or 3 adults to get him out. On the right-hand side here, my brother Mike and I, you can see several forest fires in the background and rapids in front of us. Neither were a big danger. Forest fires you could escape if you had to. We never had to escape by river. And rapids on the Yukon and Teslin, only one set of rapids are serious that we'll talk about later, and all others you can avoid or go around.
Each canoe had 2 bear sprays, one for each one of the scouts. So didn't have to worry about it. Accidents, medical emergencies. We had a couple of cuts. One of the scouts cut his thumb. We butterflied it. They got to Dawson. They said did a great job. A couple of them got sick in Carmax and down at Fort Selkirk, but nothing serious on that. Log jams and sweepers, we did have an issue with.
With all three of them.
Yeah,
actually.
Sweeper is a tree that's on the bottom right there of that slide, and you need to go around it. You can't go under it. You got to go around it. And
Because if you get in trouble, it can force your canoe against the tree, and then the current will hold it there. You can't get away. You could theoretically be trapped there.
Right. Yeah. And log jams, yeah, that's just not good. You stay away from those. The back eddies, you have to be careful when you go into, but we would string the kids out. Gary and I would normally go in first. They would watch us. We'd go in, and then one of us would get out on shore, hold the boat, and the other one would get up there and kind of coach the scouts in. And after a few eddy turns, they got pretty good at it.
And then sometimes when you get separated, you get stretched out a ways, you can lose track of the person in front and behind you, and one of you could go on one side of an island, the other go on the other side, and then come out, you can't see anybody. You don't know if they're in front or in back. But fortunately, we were never confused about that for too long.
Yeah, we told them that what they needed to do is, as soon as you could see both sides of the river, if you got separated, and you could see both sides of the river, pull over and stop and wait.
Out there.
Yeah.
The greatest danger was poor judgment. Like this, there's actually two kids side by side there. This thing is so grossly overloaded. I don't know if they made it, or it's just lack of experience there.
You kind of wobble.
I just found moose poop on my gun case. I'm going to wash it out.